Hi, and welcome to the Preservation Lab. My name is Jessica Ebert, and I'm a conservation technician here in the lab. And I also handle most of our social media, including our Instagram at the Preservation Lab and our newly created YouTube channel. Today, I get the pleasure of being your live tour guide for our first ever virtual lab tour. For those of you who don't know, the Preservation Lab is a collaboration between the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library and the University of Cincinnati Libraries. We are considered a hybrid book and paper lab, which means we conserve and preserve both the general circulating collections, so those materials that you can check out, and the special collections items from our two parent institutions. We are jointly staffed and jointly funded by those institutions. However, the lab itself resides here on UC's Uptown campus in Langston Library. During the pandemic, we have been following UC's protocols regarding safety and actually have been working within a cohort system that only allows 2 lab staff members in at a time. So in order for you to meet everyone who works in the lab, my wonderful colleagues have pre-recorded segments of the tour for you to enjoy. They will show you around the lab, area by area, and then I will join you at the end to finish off the tour. Then I'll be joined remotely by my colleague, Casey Jansen, and we will answer any questions you might have. So while you're enjoying the tour, if you see anything that you want to know more about, just let us know in the comments below, and we will give you a closer look. Now I'll turn things over to Holly to kick off the tour.
Hello, my name is Holly Prohaska, and I'm the Preservation Librarian for the University of Cincinnati Libraries and the co-manager of the Collaborative Preservation Lab. Today I'm going to give you a tour of one of our shared workspaces. Located at the front of the lab and adjacent to our main entry door and freight elevator, this area houses large and specialized equipment as well as supplies. First off is our oversized mat cutter. With this cutter, we make mats used to exhibit and protect single sheet items such as maps or broadsides. Mats both enhance the aesthetics of displayed objects and also provide protection. With this large mat cutter, we can create a wide variety of sizes and types. Next, our Mentor ultrasonic welder, one of the crown jewels of the lab. Designed and manufactured by the conservator Bill Mentor, this machine welds sheets of clear polyester film together to create custom protective sleeves. These clear sleeves protect the surface of the object, but allows access to most of the item's physical attributes and information. This type of housing is perfect for fragile, oversized items, such as posters. What makes this type of welder special is that it uses sound waves to weld the sheets together rather than heat. Next, a piece of equipment that is probably familiar to many of you, an oversized board shear. This large shear can cut thick binder's board and large sheets of paper. It is constructed of cast iron and has a large counterweight at the end of the blade that makes cutting even the thickest board almost effortless. We are fortunate to have 2 board shears in the department. This particular one is primarily used by our students and volunteers. So you can get a sense of the scale of this board shear. Let me lift the blade. It's a 60-inch blade, and you can see that the counterweight is doing most of the work. Conveniently located next to the board shear are a group of map cases that store large sheets of paper and board that can be trimmed using the board shear. In these particular cases, we have papers used to line spines and create custom pockets. Additionally, we have Bristol board, which is used to make folders and tux boxes. I've placed a tux box over here for you to see. And I'll open up one of the drawers. This is the Bristol board, and you can see we have plenty of scraps that we keep and can use and reuse for different projects. On top of the cases, we also have some variations on equipment you've already seen. Here is a small paper cutter. And here is an additional polyester film welder, but this one uses heat. Where the Minter uses sound waves, this one uses heat. And in the center of everything is a wonderful large workspace that is also a lockable cabinet, which is perfect for storing our oversized books that come in for conservation treatment. And lastly, I'd like to point out this large brass and wood book press. It's both stately and beautiful and is still heavily in use. Right now, it's pressing a stack of newspapers that will receive custom enclosures to protect and keep the contents organized. And now I will pass this on to Ashley, who will show you the work area directly across the aisle.
Hi, I'm Ashley Ferguson-Sheezer. I'm a rare book and paper conservator, and I co-manage the lab as the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library employee. And today I'm going to be showing you around our wet lab.
The studio space is really versatile. We use this as a flex space for oversized exhibition projects. We can roll up tables. We have a suction table and humidity dome nearby, as well as a fume hood. But what we primarily use this space for is conducting conservation treatment. I've got an example out of a object that has some severe tide line staining that would benefit from some deacidification and washing in this large white tray. We also do stain reduction from items that have been discolored from tape adhesive. And we use a reverse osmosis water filtration system that's hooked up to this beautiful photographic sink. The sink doubles nicely for other projects, including disaster recovery. When things come into the lab and they're wet, we also will sometimes put them in this really low temperature freezer over here. It goes down to -42 degrees, and it allows us to freeze things, stop any damage in its tracks, and pull it out in thaw it to treat it when we have the capacity to do so. We also will treat special collection items that are more fragile, that might have insect infestation. It's safer to treat fragile, brittle materials with cold rather than heat. And we also have a drying rack over to the left. So if we were to wash an entire book, we would first disbind it, wash the pages individually, and dry them out separately flat using a drying rack like this. In the lab, we also study the history and chemistry of library and archival materials. So I pulled out this Hollander beater where we've pulped fibers to create handmade sheets of paper, and then we've formed the paper and pressed out any water using this hydraulic press made by the UC Carpenters. Well, that's a quick rundown of our wet studio. I'm gonna go ahead and hand things off to Casey.
Hello, my name is Casey Jansen. I'm a senior conservation technician here at the Preservation Lab, where I'm an employee of the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library. I have the privilege today of showing out the space where our student staff and volunteers typically work. Our student staff is comprised of students here at the University of Cincinnati, and they, along with our volunteers, typically come to the lab with little to no conservation experience, which means we get to train them, starting with some of the simplest general collection repairs and working towards the more complicated. Typically, under normal circumstances, we have around 4 to 6 students and about 2 to 4 volunteers at a given time. So let's take a look at this space. In the center here, we have this really great, huge bench area where students and volunteers are able to work while keeping their tools and treatments stored away in these cubbies underneath, making it a really flexible space for anybody who needs it at any given day. Along this left wall, we have more bench space where we have some of our communal tools. We keep most of our most used tools at our benches. And here we also have some of our book presses. That brings us to our sink area, just for general cleaning up. and that's alongside of where we store our general collection items waiting to be treated. So from this perspective, we're kind of looking at some of the more complicated treatments here, things like text block repairs, binding repairs. There's even some items that need to be resewn. And then as we move down the line, we work towards some of the simpler repairs, ending with things like pamphlets and music scores. So all of these general collection items you see here are a mix of public library and university circulating materials. And that brings us back to the other side of that great big bench area where we have some flat files. These are similar to ones you've seen in other parts of the lab already. We use these flat files for storing things like Japanese tissue paper. We also have here our refrigerator where we store our loved and much used wheat starch paste. So that kind of brings us back to where we started in our student area. Let's take one last look at this beautiful, huge space. And next I get to pass you along to Katerina.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Katerina Figueirinhas. I'm one of the senior conservation technicians here at the Preservation Lab, and I'm employed by the University of Cincinnati. I'm here today to give you a brief tour of the area behind me. These are our staff and conservator bench areas, and I hope you enjoy. This is our staff and conservators bench area. Each staff member has its own workstation where they keep their materials and tools they need to conduct treatment. So let's start here. We have Casey's bench. She's actually working on surface cleaning these music scores for the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library. You can see she has her favorite tools in a cup, and we have a book press there, and also some book models that she uses as guides for treatment. Here we have one of our special collections cabinet. We have them all over the lab, and they house all of our special collections books. Some of them are waiting on treatment, and some of them the treatment has already started. Behind Casey, we have the conservator's bench, Ashley. She has a few examples of treatments that she has worked on, projects that she has worked on, and also, for example, this one here, which is still waiting for treatment. As we move along, we have a really cool tool on Ashley's bench, a built-in suction platter, which is great because it allows us to reduce staining locally. Also, we have a microscope, which we use for a lot of different things. I personally use it to identify pests when I have to. And here we have a light table that we use during treatment, and also can be used for identifying these watermarks on paper, such as this one. Moving down the line, we have my bench here, and across from me is Jessica's. I have put out two books. These are two different Bibles with similar structures, and as you can see, one of them still needs treatment, while the other one, the treatment is complete. Jessica and I have a collection of book models that we have created over the years, and these are used as guides for treatment. Over here, we have our special collections cabinet for the technicians, where we have all the projects we're working on. Each technician has its own shelf, and here's where we keep all the projects we're currently working. Moving down, we have here a table with some printed surrogates that we needed for a book that had some missing pages. And we also have a sink where we wash all of our tools after a day of work. And down the line, here we have Chris and Hyacinth's bench. So Chris's bench is here, and he works on a lot of large projects, like a lot of housing projects. And as you can see, he has a lot of boxes that he is creating for some heavy books. And finally here we have Hyacinth's bench, and she also works on housing projects. We have here a pan binder and also a tuxedo box. To give you a grand view, here's the entire staff area with all of our workspace, and I am going to pass it on to Hyacinth.
Hello, I'm Hyacinth Tucker. I'm with the University of Cincinnati Libraries, and I'm a conservation tech and bindery processor for the lab. And I will be giving you a tour of the Epson printer and our research collection. So let's get started. We'll start here with the Epson SureColor P7000. It's our big surrogate printer. Surrogates, as you might be able to guess from the title, are pieces that are used as a substitute for any kind of a two-dimensional item, like a photograph or letters of some sort that might be too fragile for any kind of constant handling and display. It's often put with pieces that we've conserved so that they can be shown at a later date, and allows them to be seen by the general public while the original is stored, away from any kind of detrimental effects like light damage or handling from hands. And this is our research library. It's our constantly evolving collection of research items that we've accumulated on all manner of topics relating to conservation: book and paper, photography, paper making, any kind of book binding, stitch work. We've accumulated them as ready references for working on things that we may not necessarily know how to handle. We've got a good ready reference of pieces. Includes a lot of recent periodicals, as well as a good number of samples that we have either gotten from outside sources, such as a bindery, or that we have created ourselves in the lab, so that we have visual examples of stitch work, of enclosures of all kinds. And they allow us to have good handy things at our fingertips so that when people ask questions or when we're teaching new topics, we have visuals for people to study. All right, and I will hand you off to Chris.
Hello, I am Chris Vornovich, a senior conservation assistant working for the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library, or CHPL. I hope you are enjoying our virtual lab tour. I will be showing you the area where our crimper and board and cloth organizer are located. Our crimper is used to make quick folds for custom corrugated enclosures. Here are a couple examples. You will notice that the foot pedal has been padded, as we all have found occasion one time or another to bash our shins on it. Our board and cloth organizer is one unit and is quite heavy. There is book cloth for spine repair, new cases, and custom clamshells. Also binder's board and corrugated board used for custom clamshells. Remay, Polytex, and other supplies, all of which are archival for maximum preservation quality. And now, back to Jessica to complete your tour.
Hi again. So while I'm a technician in the lab, and actually the student supervisor for the lab, I'm also the photographic documentation specialist. So it's only fitting that I give you a tour of the 2 photography studios that reside here in the lab. So let me turn you around. Let's see, there we go. All right, so now we're going to head over to the UC Library's digital imaging studio, where digital collections manager Sydney Gao oversees the digitization workflow for UC libraries. So the key feature in this space is the phase 1, which is a 60 megapixel digital back camera. There it is, mounted to a very large copy stand It is extremely versatile for shooting a wide variety of items, and it's actually a great complement to the digital imaging equipment that can be found at the public library's digital services studio. So next we are going to head over to my favorite area in the lab, which is the conservation photography studio. So we affectionately call the studio PhotoDoc because photographic documentation is an essential part of special collections treatment. It's the visual representation that accompanies the written treatment reports that we create. So here we go. I like to different types of photography by saying that while digitization focuses on the content within a book and making that content accessible to as many people as possible, conservation photography focuses on the condition of the book, both before, during, and after treatment, as well as the materiality of the item. So in the studio, of course, you have locked cabinet, like you've seen in all over the lab to keep things nice, safe, and secure. Then we have a bench setup, which is really ideal for kind of three-dimensional photography, which is especially important for books. Then we have a much smaller copy stand, which is great for shooting flat items like maps, photographs, interiors of books. We have a scanner, and then a Mac for tethered photography. And then I do have a another tripod here that I use if I need to shoot oversized items on the floor. So with conservation photography, we use a lot of specialized techniques, including UV, fluorescence, near infrared, reflections transformation. So I've pulled out some protective eyewear when using UV. We have a modifier for near red, RTI, and then some everyday kind of equipment that I would use, like a color checker or a gray card for white balancing. Now, before we get into the Q&A portion, I want to show you one more piece of equipment, which if I might have been lost. Hold on a second. Casey, have I been lost?
We can see you. You were just lost
Okay.
for a second, so you're good.
Okay. I'm good now. Okay. All right. So if you saw my promo video, then you saw this large contraption behind me. It is the thing that whenever we've had an in-person tour, everyone is always curious about because it just looks so strange. It's actually two pieces of equipment in one. As it is now with the lid open, it serves as a suction table. We hook up another piece of equipment to the bottom, and then the entire surface becomes a suction table where we can do localized washing and stain reduction. Then let me close this lid. Close the lid, and we can hook up a ultrasonic humidifier to the top here and slowly introduce gentle humidity into the chamber, creating a humidification dome. This allows for humidifying rolled or curled items like the examples I have inside, and the gentle humidity will then relax the paper fibers and allow them to flatten. So that is our big humidification dome and suction table. Now let's see if we have any questions.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Casey Jansen. You cannot see my face, but I will be the voice of the questions. So Jessica, we have our first question. What is the most interesting artifact you've worked on? This is for the staff in general. So Jessica, you see some really, really great ones since you do all the photo documentation.
Yeah, so for me, it's probably anything I get to do RTI or UV or anything like that, any of those specialized types of photography, those are my favorites to do. So actually back here on my screen, I'm going so not try to give you guys motion sickness. I have on one of my favorites, our first RTI projects, which was this Martin Luther text from 1568. And it's just so much fun. You get to take something where you can't see the surface of it, and then you get to see the surface in like a whole new way. And it's just so much fun. So anytime I get to work on something like that, I am happy. Not that I'm not happy most of the time I'm doing photo doc. What about you, Casey? Anything stand out?
I think that's what's so interesting about our job in the lab is that we get to see so many different things from all different time periods. But one that I really think of fondly was, I believe it was a 19th century anatomical book, and the engravings were incredibly detailed and really beautiful. It ended up being a rebinding treatment that we kind of had to problem solve. But again, that's the great part about working in the lab. We can all kind of collaborate and work together on different treatments that we may know or have learned. But yeah, I think very fondly of that one. And I wrote a blog post about that one. If you're curious about what it was, it's on our blog.
Cool.
Okay, we have another question. Okay, so can you talk more about the models that Katerina pointed out? How are they made and how do you use them?
All right. So all of us create a variety of models whenever we're learning something new. Here are Katerina and my model collection. I don't think this is even all of them. But anytime we're doing a treatment that's kind of new, here's some of the things on Katerina's bench. We will practice it out on a non-collection item, finesse it, get it just right. It's especially important for really rare items, but anytime too we're learning something brand new, which I'll go back to the front. One of the things that we've worked with our conservator Ashley on is using our ultrasonic welder to the max capacity. So we actually create these encapsulated bindings, which I've got some models out here, that allow us to take really, really fragile items and kind of put them back into a binding form. So you can kind of see we can encapsulate pages, even if there's like thick, heavy items. So this is actually something that we did for a larger project, a larger treatment for the public library that we worked on called Althea Hurst, which was a massive scrapbook with tons of little components like that. And really kind of figuring everything out on a smaller scale because it was quite large. And figuring out how we were going to weld certain things, how we were going to finesse all these little parts and components, really, really allowed us to like not have stress then when we were working with the actual item. We knew what we were going to do and we did it as a team and it worked beautifully. So thank you. That was a great question.
Okay, the next one is quite a setup. Do other large cities have comparable arrangements, or how unique is yours? That's a really good question.
That is a very good question. So a lot of universities do have conservation labs. Ours is quite unique. As far as we know, we were the first collaborative lab that was a collaboration between a public library and an academic library. So I think we were the first in the country to do that. But there are definitely other collaborative labs in different capacities. And they're often just university labs or public library labs. But we were quite unique. The preservation, or it was called Conservation Lab, was here since like the late 80s. And then 9 years ago, actually 9 years ago this month, we just celebrated our 9-year anniversary of the collaboration. we got together and signed a memo of understanding and worked all this stuff out, and it's been growing and getting bigger every year. So it's been wonderful. Great question.
Yeah, it is a really large space, and you'll see that beautiful window. Not a lot of labs have windows, so we're
No.
very fortunate to have such a good view.
Yes.
Okay, we have another question. Do most universities have a preservation department?
I would say that most big universities have a preservation or conservation lab, but not all. Smaller institutions, it's a lot to figure in logistically, and a lot of money to invest, and not everyone has that infrastructure. That's why our collaboration came together. We were able to take kind of what UC was doing, what the public library was doing, and make it infinitely stronger with more staff, more money, more everything. So that was really great. What you will see is a lot of art museums and things like that. Museums tend to always usually have a conservation lab, and we'll actually have multiple conservation labs because they'll have not just book and paper, they'll have a paintings conservation lab and a textile lab or an objects lab. So yeah, that was a great question.
Okay, here's another one, Jessica. What do you recommend for those of us with favorite books at home that are falling apart? Oh my goodness.
Well, unfortunately, the lab can't help you. We only work on third-party clients who are parts of cultural heritage institutions. But we actually, Casey, myself, and our colleague Katerina actually did a little Facebook Live event through the public library in mid 2020 about preserving your own personal library. So tips and tricks for keeping your items nice and safe on the shelf. There are always two private conservators that you can contact if your item is really, really important to you and really valuable to you. And I think we could probably share some resources if people wanted that as well. Yeah. Good question.
Okay. Oh, here's another one. Where do you get artifacts to work on?
We don't have a problem with that. I will say we have lots and lots of items to work on. We have, so the public library has 40 plus branches, I think. They also have many different special collections, including the Cincinnati Room collections, which are rare, special archival. And then UC libraries, we have several different libraries on campus. We have, I think, 10 college and departmental libraries, but then also several special collections libraries. So things like archives and rare books, the Winkler Center at the Health Science Library, all of those. We have monthly meetings where we get items from them. We return items that we've completed treatment on. That is what's in these locked cabinets, or items awaiting treatment for special collections treatment. So we do all of those. And then we also handle things like exhibits, disaster recovery, all that stuff. So we keep quite busy. And then we also do some third-party treatment. So over here, actually, Katerina has a third-party treatment on her bench that she is working on. So this item is part of the Archives and Rare Books Library, and we received it. And then we received this from it's a Bible, I believe, from the Conner Prairie Library at the Conner Prairie Museum in Indianapolis. And since they're quite similar, she's been working on them in tandem. So this one has been resewn with a new spine put on, all its joints consolidated. And this one you can see she's getting ready to resew. Get that out there. She's getting ready to resew, and then she's going to work on reattaching those detached covers and putting on a new spine. So That's a good example. We also do a lot of third-party work with Hebrew Union College since they are right down the road and they are lovely to work with.
Yeah, that was a really great question. Thanks, Jessica. This
Yeah.
one's a bit longer, so
Okay.
bear with me, Jessica, and we can I can always reiterate anything that needs to be restated. So thank you very much for the work you do. Another staff question. Can you give us a general overview of the timeline of different projects? How long does it take to build a box for something, to remove stains from paper, to rebind something more complicated?
Wow, that is a good one.
Yeah, definitely. That encompasses
So
our whole job.
yes. So I think one way to break things down is to say it's not that easy to answer that question because everything is totally unique and its own. So with special collections and general collections. So for general collections, we have flags that we work on that dictate the treatment, what's involved in the treatment. And then for special collections, we have sheets. This is a third-party sheet, but they're much more detailed. And then we actually have another sheet where we write down every single aspect of the treatment. You can think something's gonna be, oh, this is a recase. I know how to do this. I've done this before. But you never know. There's all these different factors when you're working on something and when you jump into it that can cause more and more time. Our boxes can take anywhere from like 30 to 45 minutes for a tuxedo box or a corrugated clamshell. But then you might have a box like this one, which is a custom cloth clamshell with an integrated cradle. That might take, it would probably take Chris like a couple hours, but any normal other person in the lab who's not a speed demon, that would probably take us like 8 hours at least to just make this box alone. So sorry if I didn't completely answer the question, but nothing is a given set amount of time. So in order to kind of combat that and to keep the workloads between the two institutions even, we actually do workload points that have values based on who's working on it, how long it took, so that we can keep the treatment time between the two institutions and as even and fair as possible. So that works out really well for us.
Yeah, Jessica, you answered that perfectly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you covered it all. It all depends on our line of work. And we're all have different skills that make us either faster or slower, and we all want to learn things. So our team is amazing. It's great you got to meet everybody in the videos because we're all so knowledgeable and skilled. But okay, next question. What education is required for your specialty? Another complicated question.
All right, I'm going to let you answer this one.
Okay. Yeah, this is a little complicated because people come to this line of work through different ways. I think our lab is a really good example of that. I think we've all kind of come to learn our skills and learn about this line of work in different ways. The most recognized way of starting to work in a conservation lab like ours is to get your master's degree in art conservation. And there's only a few programs in the country that do that. I think there are currently only 4 master's programs that do that, but that is the most recognized way to go. And typically that looks like it's a 3-year program, 2 years of which is more class-based learning. And then the 3rd year is typically a full year internship. Where you get some true bench experience, and it's a great way to learn all of the information and also learn how to apply the information. So those are amazing programs. That is where our conservator Ashley, that's how she came to work in the lab, is through one of those programs. And then there are people like myself and Katerina and Holly who have masters in library science. And that is another way you can kind of get to, that's how I even found out about the field, is getting my master's degree in library science. I honestly didn't know this was a thing until I started going to school for something different. But it's having that background is also helpful because you know the intricacies of libraries and the importance of accessibility and all those things. So, and then there's people who are 100% bench trained, and that is a great way to learn too, because you have basically devoted all of your time in the field to learning these skills. So there are lots of different ways. A lot of times people get started with shorter internships or volunteer opportunities. For example, one of our volunteers who is an employee of the public library started as a volunteer for us, and she's kind of working her way into the field now. So you can start really small and grow in interesting ways. So it depends, but
Yeah.
it.
And I'm definitely one of the latter. I have a bachelor's and just wanted to work in a library, and I've been here in the lab. I lucked out on this job. Been here in the lab for 13 plus years now, and I've learned everything I know from the staff in the lab, from our conservator, and from just training outside of the lab as well. So all of my skills have been learned here. Or externally. So yeah, there's lots of different ways, which makes it super, super great to get into conservation.
Mm-hmm. And it's a field of constantly learning. If you want to learn something, there is a way for you to learn it. And we're always learning new binding techniques and new treatment techniques. So that's probably why we're all so excited about showing out the lab, because we just
Yes.
love the field so much and want to always learn more. Okay, Jessica, you're in the perfect spot for this
Yes.
question. What is the view from the window? I'd say it's 50% lovely and 50% not so lovely. But
Yeah.
yeah, please show us.
So it used to be this beautiful view of Burnett Woods, which is right across from Langston Library. Unfortunately, they have now put in this like dumping site where they dump things. I'm not sure what. Now it kind of looks like something from Jurassic Park, which has its own charm. And then we also have a view of Crosley Tower. Which some love and some don't. But but we do get to see some greenery, which is amazing. We get all this natural light. It makes for our when we did work all together, our meetings would always be here, and that was just beautiful. So it used to be prettier like 10 years ago, but we're thankful for the light.
All right. Yeah, we're so happy to have windows. So many labs are in basements, and I can't imagine not seeing the outside during the day. We're going to, I think, try to tackle 3 more questions. And if people want to keep asking questions, we can always come back and just type responses into the event. So your question will not go unanswered, but we are kind of running out of time. So we're probably going to wrap up with these final 3. So the next one is from a former conservator in the lab, Kathy. Have you incorporated RTI imaging into a lot of projects?
Kathy, I do it whenever I possibly can. So I learned RTI, reflective transformation imaging, from cultural heritage imaging at a workshop they did at Yale. And since then, anything that has a hidden texture on it or anything like that, if I can do RTI, I am a happy lady. And we usually use this reverse tripod on the floor for doing RTI because you need a lot of space and you don't want any shadows. But, and Katerina, shout out to Katerina. She's my go-to RTI buddy. Yeah, we do it whenever it seems necessary. So if something's going to go on exhibit and we can show off something with RTI that you wouldn't see otherwise, then we're going to do it. So we've done it for some adopt-a-book items. We've done it for some cuneiform tablets because we had some areas where it was hard to actually read the inscription, and RTI, boy oh boy, just made those kind of indentations totally visible. Yeah, and I think we might have a RTI project coming up in the near future for a future exhibit. And as soon as I was told that it might happen, I got so excited. I love RTI. It's so much fun. It takes a little bit of time to do, but in the end, you get like just the coolest things out of it. So thank you for the question.
All right, one more, or I guess two more, second to last question. Does the pandemic have any impact on lab projects or funding? Do you get more or fewer preservation projects?
This is an excellent question, which we've also kind of hit a little bit here and there on our blog as well. So definitely check out our blog. During the pandemic, most of us are working most of the time from home. And we've kind of pivoted to general circulating collection items. So whereas the staff would normally spend a bulk of their time on special collections items, and we very rarely had time before the pandemic for general collections, now it's the opposite. We've got less students working for us right now. We actually have one. So the staff have taken on the general collections items because we can actually take those home with us, unlike the special collections. And then also we have some medium rare items that also we've gotten approval to take them home as well, which this is a good example. Are some information and reference music scores, historical music scores from the public library, which we are able to kind of like do some prep here. Well, Casey is able to do some prep. This is Casey's bench here, and then she's able to take them home and do a bulk of the treatment there. In the beginning of the pandemic, we also did a lot of, and we continue to do research on areas that we find interesting or that are prevalent or important to our work, a lot of workshops, a lot of things like that. So we still have lots to work on. So we have not been affected in that way. And as we start doing more work in the lab, spending more time in here, we have cabinets full of special collections items waiting to be treated, and that will be our focus. So great question.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how well we have adapted to a pandemic. I think early on, our work seemed 100% only doable in the lab, but we've all created really amazing work from home spaces and have just adapted really beautifully. And our institutions are willing to let us bring home general collections to work on. And it's just, we talk to a lot of other professionals in the field, and it seems like we are just nailing it in terms of being able to work from home and still get production done to get items back into their home branches. Last question, and I think this is a follow-up question to a previous one that we've answered. So thank you for your answer to my previous question. There we go. I should read it before. Oh, goodness. Here's another that might be easier. Are you still accepting volunteers during the pandemic? How does one become a volunteer?
Wow, good question. So unfortunately, all of our current volunteers are not able to work with us right now because we are taking such a conservative approach to being in the lab. And also, so I'm the student supervisor, and right now we only have one student working for us, and I will likely not hire more until after I can actually be in the same space with them. Because it is so hands-on, we really can't take on any new volunteers at this time because we have a 6 feet distancing rule and a mask rule. It really wouldn't be conducive to learning new treatments. So we hope to one day get our current volunteers back in here with us. We miss them. But usually through either of our institutions, potential volunteers will contact our co-managers, Ashley and Holly, and then they will be vetted and kind of asked why they're interested, all those things. And then usually buddied up with a mentor So one of the staff members who then kind of leads them through all of the general collections repairs, and that's primarily what our volunteers work on. Hopefully I answered that.
Yeah. The pandemic has definitely thrown a wrench into our volunteers, but hopefully when this is all over, we'll be back to having normal volunteers and hopefully accepting new volunteers in the future as well.
Yeah, we miss them.
Yeah, we have some really amazingly skilled volunteers.
Yeah.
I think we're really lucky in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I mentioned, if you have questions, please keep asking them. We can keep our eye out for those and answer them as we see them. And we've been sharing links to our Instagram and the blog, which we've mentioned several times. So please check us out there and feel free to talk to us or ask us more questions through those means as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, so if that's all our questions for right now, I think we're done. I just want to say thank you on behalf of the entire lab for joining us. It's been wonderful sharing our space with you. Keep those questions coming. Check out all our social media. We've got a lot of fun stuff happening on our new YouTube, so check that out. But just enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for tuning in.